All right, Rabosai, good morning. Let us begin. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors for today's shir. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors, Yoel Sara Kelman, for dedicating all of this shiurim and drashos this month in honor of the birth of their daughter Oriya Tahel, and in the hope that Amir Hashem, all those who are davening for children will have their tefilos answered bekarov. To thank Teri Czinn for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this month in honor of their grandchildren Adin, Tzvi, and Naftali Moshe. To thank Shirley Elbaum Family for dedicating the shiurim and drashos this month in memory of Gerald Elbaum, Yaakov Kopel ben R Avraham Menachem. And to thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Gedaliah Donna Rosenbloom, for dedicating the shir in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Donna's mother, Chana Bas Moshe, Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. And also with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, but incredible Gemara to do today. Today's daf is Tes Zayin 16. We are picking up on Tes Vavam of days 15b, and Abosai, we're picking up in the wide lines, 3 lines in, end of the line. Vahi kir'os hamelach es Esther hamalka. When the king saw Esther hamalka, so says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Gil malachi asharis nizdam l'ba'osa shah. Esther had 3 malachim, 3 angels, who were helping her at that moment. Achoshek bi'as savara. One literally again lifted her head, right, or lifted her neck. So in other words, Esther was, we're going to see, Esther was scared. Esther was scared. So therefore, like, she was almost like crouched, like stooped. So one malach helped to lift her head. One malach that again endowed her with extra chesed, literally a strand of chesed upon her. And one that extended the scepter. In other words, the Gemara seems to indicate that halacha l'maisa, it's not so pashut that Achashverosh was going to extend the scepter to Esther, and a malach came and helped to extend the scepter. So the Gemara says, the Kama. So interestingly enough, extending the scepter doesn't just mean that the malach helped to raise the scepter, but it means he extended the scepter. How much did he extend the scepter? So the scepter was 2, the malach extended it to 12. Others say 16. 24. Masnisa Tana Shal Shishim, it was extended at 60 amas. By the way, you see this concept of miraculous extensions. Where else do you find this? By the daughter of Bas Paro, by Bitya, like we just saw in last week's parsha. And we just referenced to the Gemara that amazingly enough, again, Vatishlach amasa. Rashi says Bitya reached out to go ahead and take the teva. And again, even though it was clearly far out of reach, she was still able miraculously to go ahead and reach it. And you see the same miracle again with the teeth of the wicked. Rashi points out over here that this is a reference to the story of Og Melech HaBashan. Og, who was one of the giants, was also one of the kings of Canaan, wanted to throw a mountain upon Klal Yisrael. He had uprooted a mountain as we were traveling through the desert, and a miracle occurred. Insects bore through the mountain. The mountain fell on Og's head. The miracle occurred that Og's teeth extended, and essentially the mountain got lodged on his head. So the Gemara is using this as another reference to miraculous extensions. So we see again a miraculous extension by the scepter of Achashverosh, by the hand of Bas Paro, and by the teeth of Og. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Atiku Shibarta, Shini Rishon Shibarta, Atiku Shibarta, Ele Sherivavta. So again, literally you break the teeth of the wicked. But Rish Lakish says, don't read it as break, rather read it as elongate. Rabbi Bar Afan Amr Shabbos, just I'll mention the Lublina Rav, just because it's kedai to mention Avar by the Lublina Rav, says by Bas Paro, such a beautiful idea. We've said it before in the past. Lublina Rav says, why did Bas Paro even bother to reach out to get the basket? Now, as I will say, you reach for something that you think you have a shaykhas, you think you have a chance of holding on to, but if I want the tissues on that table, I'm not reaching out my hand. It's not shaykh, it's too far. So why does Bas Paro extend her hand in order to go ahead and get the teva? So the Lublina Rav says, you see from here that sometimes in life, even when something looks impossible, if you feel it has to get done, you have to try. Bas Paro saw a baby. She knew it was a baby in the basket. So she felt, what am I going to do? Not try? Not try to save the child? Not try to do something? Sometimes when it looks impossible, but it's important, you have to try. You have to try. And the hope is that if the cause is a noble one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help you accomplish the impossible. That's the Lina Rav and Bas Paro. It's a beautiful idea. Rabbi Bar Ofer Mishur Lazar Sheshamo Meirabo V'Rabo Meirabo Masayim. All right, others say that it extended 200 amas. So once again, the king says to Esther Malka, Mama Kashaseich Ad Chatzi HaMalchus Vateas. So Achashverosh says to Esther, what's your request? Until half of the kingdom I'll give you. So the Gemara says, interesting, Chatzi HaMalchus V'lo Kol HaMalchus. First, Achashverosh was giving, but not so giving, right? I'll give you up to half of the kingdom, but not the whole kingdom. Furthermore, V'lo Davar Shechotzitz L'Malchus. Nor will I give you the thing which divides the kingdom. What's the thing which divides the kingdom? Umay nihu binyan beis hamikdash. So I won't give you that thing which stands in the middle of my kingdom, which is the beis hamikdash. So Rabbi says this is very interesting. Remember again, as you pointed out before, Achashverosh halted the construction of the beis hamikdash. So he says to Esther, I'll give you anything, but I'm not going to give you the beis hamikdash. Now, what does this mean? Does this mean that Achashverosh suspected that Esther was Jewish, or does this mean Achashverosh already kind of staking out his territory, telling her, I'll give you whatever you want, but there are certain things that are non-negotiable I'm not giving you? Good. So what does Esther say? Here's my request. I would like the king and Haman to come to a party. So it says the Gemara Haman. Why did Esther invite them to a party? What's the pshat? What was the Psirbo say? Here's what's interesting. We know the whole story of the Megillah, but the Megillah is asking a different question. Esther, what's the plan? Right? What's the plan? Obviously, you're inviting everyone to a party. You must have had a plan. What's your plan? Right? Mara, what was the plan? So says the Gemara, says incredible. Rabbi Lazar Amar, Pachim Tamna Lo. Ultimately, again, literally translated, she was stirring the coals against Haman. So we'll say, that doesn't really, what Rabbi Lazar is saying is, Esther had a plan. Okay, that's nice. We're asking, what's the plan? He just said, she's stirring the coals, she has a plan. Fine. Rabbi Shomer, mi beis avi halam, shnemar imra'iv sonacha hechilu lachem. She learned this lesson from her grandfather's home, which is, again, this piece of Solomonic wisdom. If your enemy is hungry, feed him bread. Which I will say is an interesting idea that sometimes the way to neutralize one's enemies is to smother them with kindness. So perhaps Esther Malka feels if she goes in and she brings Haman into her confidence, to get even more into the king's confidence, maybe this will affect a turnaround. Remeir Omer was actually very profound as well, because remember, we've seen by Haman that so much of what pushes him to engage in this egregious behavior is a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-confidence, a lack of self-worth, right? Nothing's worth anything to me when I'm reminded that I was a servant to Mordechai. So she thinks maybe if we build up a person, sometimes you build a person up and they do good things. Good. This is very interesting. Meir says, Esther is concerned about Haman leading a rebellion against Achashverosh. So Esther felt, keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer. Keep him close, that way no rebellion. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kadesh lo yakiru bashi Yehudis. Rabbi Yehuda says, Esther didn't want anyone to suspect that she was a Jew. Well, the best way to avoid anyone suspecting you're a Jew is what? Invite the archenemy of the Jewish people to a party. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kadeshu Matsui. Rabbi Nechemya Omer, Kadesh lo yomru Yisrael achos yeshlam beis hamelach v'yasichu daitam min arachmim. Incredible. Rabbi Nechemya says, Esther didn't want the Jewish people to stop davening. Esther was nervous that the Jewish people would feel, we don't have to daven, we've got a Jewish queen. So it's almost like, what's this incredible thing, Esther, which is fascinating, Esther wanted the people to feel a sense of yeush, to feel a sense of despair. Can you imagine you're a Jew in Shushan and you see that Esther Hamalka invited Haman to a party, right? What's your reaction to that? There's clearly no hope, right? Or at least, there's no human intervention here, right? Esther's inviting Haman to a party. She's lost. You have to go to Kadosh Baruch Hu. So Esther, which is actually an incredible thing, sometimes the only time that people take decisive action is when they have no other options. It's like in general, we spoke about this before, people really only make changes when they have to. It could be that Esther feels that the people haven't mobilized enough. So what does she do? She creates a sense of desperation. How does she create desperation? Make a party and invite Haman. That's going to throw the Jews into a tizzy and going to make them recognize they need to do the tshuva they need to do the tefilos they need to do, because there is no one to rely on except HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kadesh Yimatzei La B'cholis. Rabbi Yossi says, it's interesting, there's not really a plan. There's not really a plan per se, right? There's ultimately just the idea, once again, of keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. And Esther's hoping if Haman is close, the opportunity to undermine him will come up. Rabbi Shimon Menachem Omer, Ulai Yargish Hamakom V'Yasal Adonis. Maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu will see my pain. Look how desperate I have become, that I am inviting Achashverosh, the enemy, the man who wants to destroy my people. I'm inviting him to a party. Look how desperate I am, Hashem. Perhaps Hashem will feel my desperation and spring into action. Rabbi Shimon Karcha Omer, Asbir lo panim, this is incredible. Rabbi Shimon Karcha says, Esther planned on acting in an intimate way towards Haman. Now, what do I mean by that? Almost like, maybe intimate is the wrong word, like a flirtatious fashion. Asbir lo panim. She wanted to make the king think that she was having an affair with Haman. And if she can make the king that what happens? What happens? He'll kill them both. And even though, again, that meant the sacrifice of her life, she's willing to sacrifice her life if it means, if the Haman's going to be killed as well. So incredible. So the Gemara said, Rabbi Gamliel Omer, Malach hafach fichan haya. Rabbi Gamliel said that ultimately, again, this was a king who was constantly going back and forth. So because he was a king who was going back and forth, Esther said the same way that Haman was able to convince him with a relatively short argument. Perhaps, again, if we're all in the room together, I'll be able to convince him to retract his words as well. Rabbi Gamliel says these are all great ideas, but we still need the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer Hamodi. So the Gemara, this time Rabbi Eliezer Hamodi, Omer, Kanasa HaMelech, Kanasa B'sarim. Esther was very smart. What was she trying to do? She was trying to create strife between Haman and everyone around him. So by inviting him to a party with just the king, it's interesting, she's creating strife between him and the king. Because the king is like, why is my queen inviting someone else to a party with me? Right? Haman's not my equal. Right? Haman's not my peer. And for the other ministers, it's creating animosity. In other words, so she is sowing. So it's an amazing thing. Certain things in life don't change. Ego drives everything. And especially in politics. And especially in leadership. Ego, unfortunately, plays such a dominant role. So play on people's egos. Make people, right? Why is he getting more covet than me? Why is he getting more attention than me? And it's just a matter of time until everyone turns against Haman. Pretty incredible. Rabba Amar Lifnei Shever Gon. Rabba says, you see from here that before downfall is arrogance. Abai Rav Darmit Harvayu Bechomim Arshis Es Mishtehem. So I'll say again, another passage to support this idea. Ashkechir Rabba bar Avua le'Elio. So I'll listen to this. Rabba bar Avua said to Elio, Amrli Kimban Chazia Esther va'avda. So he said, Elio, we have all these different opinions as to why Esther kind of hatched her plan to make the party. Who's right? Amrle Kulu Tanoi Obekulu Amarai. Elio and Avi said, they're all right. In other words, I remember again, these approaches are not mutually exclusive. It could be that Esther had all of these cheshbonos. So they'll both say, I often think that the godless of Esther is, at times, she did not know what she was doing. In other words, the Pasha Pshat in the Megillah is she invited him to a party. And why does she invite him to a party? Why? Because the truth is, she's hoping that something's going to happen, right? The courage of Esther Hamalka. See, there's no great, I shouldn't say, it's understandable when in life you have a great plan and you take action. That makes sense. What's even a greater level is when you don't have a plan, but you know action has to be taken and you rise to the occasion. See, that was the greatness of Esther Hamalka. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have a plan. These are all interpretations. She didn't have a plan, right? But she also knew I have to do something. And the ability to act, even in the absence of a plan, because you know something has to be done, is in and of itself such a dramatic idea. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, "Vayisapel Haman es kvod ashro, v'rov banav." So we'll say Haman told this to his family members, right? He told his family members the greatness of his wealth. Rov banav, the kama rov banav. How many sons did Haman have? Amarav Lamed, 30 sons. Asara Mesu, 10 of them died. V'asara Nitlu, 10 of them were hanged. V'asara Machzirin ala Psochim. And ultimately, again, 10 of them became beggars. Rabbanan Amri, Osan Shemachzirin ala Psochim, Shivim Havya. No, he had 70 sons, ultimately who became beggars. D'chsev, Shiv Sveim Balechem Niskaru. Al Tikvi Sveim Ela Shivim. Rai Barachama Amar Kulan Masayim Ushmona Havu. It's very interesting. It says, no, altogether Haman had 208 sons. Shnei Amar, Verov Banav, Verov Bigematria, Masan Va'arbeisa. But Zimar said, 1 second. Rov in Gematria is 114. Ultimately, again, it's written Virav Chaser. Okay. By the way, we don't have time for it now, but hopefully we'll get to it in Meretz Hashem to hear a little bit about Haman's descendants as well. Some very interesting things happen from the descendants of Haman, who survived. We'll discuss. So the Gemara that night the king could not sleep. Amar Rabbi Tanchum. Who couldn't sleep that night? When it says the king couldn't sleep, it's not a reference to Haman. Who is it a reference to? To Achashverosh. For Rabbanan Amri, nadadu elyonim, nadadu tachtonim. Because, so this is beautiful. Actually, look at Rashi. Nadadu elyonim she'em malachim mafhilim osa kalalayla. The malachim were stirring in the heavens, and they kept Achashverosh awake. The Malachim would not let Achashverosh sleep because they wanted Achashverosh ultimately again to give Torah. Remember again what happens that night. We're going to see. Rava Amar Shnas Hamalach Achashverosh Mamish. No, Achashverosh could not sleep. Why couldn't he sleep? Naftali milsa b'daite. So ultimately, again, here's what he begins to think. Rabbi says Esther's plan worked beautifully. He began to think, "Mai dikaman dezimante Esther lahaman dilma itza kashakli iluye dahu gavra lemikdale." Here's what's going through Achashverosh's mind. Why did Esther invite Haman to a party? Are they planning a coup? Are they planning a coup, a rebellion against me? And if so, Hadra Amar, Ihachi lo hava gavra derachimli davamodali. And if they're planning a coup, do I have no allies who would tell me about the coup? Is there no one who would tell me about this? To which the Gemara says, Hadra Amar, Dilma Ika Inish Da'abed Bituvusa, Velo Pirate, Bishum Hachi Mimne Ishu Velo Megali. Well, maybe no one tells me because maybe they look at me as an ingrate. Maybe I'm the kind of person, when people do good for me, I don't repay them with good, and therefore no one's telling me anything. In other words, what Haman is concerned about is, maybe in the past there was someone who did good for me, and I never repaid them for their chesed. That's why I have no allies. So what does he do? Miyad, vayomer lahavi sefer zichronos divrayam v'yunikraim. So what does Achashverosh say? Immediately, bring me my sefer zichronos. Right? Bring me my book of remembrance, and let me see. Maybe there is someone who did good for me, and I did not properly repay, and this is why I have no allies who would inform me about a potential coup. So the Gemara says, amazing, a miracle occurred, and literally again, when Achashverosh opened this book, the words read themselves, which is part of this narrative, right? The Malachim are keeping Achashverosh awake. They're planting this seed in his mind. There's a rebellion brewing. Why is no one telling me? I have no friends. I have no allies. Maybe because I never went ahead and did good by those who did good by me. Vayimatzei kasuv. So the Gemara says he found it in kasav mi ba'ilei. It shouldn't say kasuv. It should say kasav. Melamed. Top of Tazayin, Shimshi Mochek, V'Gavriel Kosev. This is incredible. Shimshi was the scribe of Achashverosh. Shimshi found this account of Mordechai, right? That Mordechai had saved Achashverosh from the assassination attempt. And what was Shimshi doing? He's erasing it. And every single time Shimshi erased it, the Malach Gavriel came and rewrote it. Incredible. Some Rabbi Yasi Darsh of Shila Ish Kvartan Rasa, Umak Sav Shalamata, Shelischusan Shaisa Inonimchak, Ksav Shalamata Lo Kol Shekin. I will say, what a musar. If writing in this world, which ultimately highlights the merits of the righteous, cannot be erased, then Allah has kama v'kama when we do something good, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu inscribes it in His Sefer HaZechronos, His book of remembrance in the celestial sphere. Allah has kama v'kama that it's never erased. Lo na'aseh imo davar. So remember again, so Achashverosh finds out that that nothing was ever done for Mordechai. Amar Rava, lo mipnei shu'avin es Mordechai, ela mipnei shesonin es Haman. So we'll say, remember again, at this point when the scribe, when Shimshi tells or Hasach tells Achashverosh that nothing was ever done for Mordechai, it's not because they love Mordechai, but rather what? It's because they hated Haman. So we'll say, at this, what's amazing is you begin to see the subtext of this. The tide began to turn against Haman. No, people don't like him. And because of that, again, what is it? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Right? So that at this point in time, they'd rather side with Mordechai than Haman. It's incredible. So the Gemara says, Heichin lo. So the pasuk said, we'll say, so remember again, at the same time, Achashverosh hears construction in the courtyard. This is what's going on in the courtyard. Mi b'chatzer, what's happening? And remember again, Haman had come to erect the gallows upon which he was going to go ahead and hang Mordechai. So hechen lo, that he has prepared for him. Tana lo hechen, right? The gallows hechen lo that Haman prepared for Mordechai, lo hechen, were prepared for Haman himself. So remember again, Achashverosh summons Haman, and this is the famous exchange, right, where he says to Achashverosh, what should we do for the person? Asher melech chafetz bikaro, right? So remember, Haman thinks that the king is talking about him, and he goes through this whole list of things that the king should do. Achashverosh says, great idea, do all of this for Mordechai. Amar le, manu Mordechai. So listen to this. So Haman plays dumb. He says, Mordechai who? I don't know, there's Mordechai Schwartz, Mordechai Epstein, right? Which Mordechai are you talking about? Amarle ha-Yehudi, right? Mordechai ha-Yehudi. Amarle, Tuva Mordechai Ika. There are those Jews, so many of them, right? It's like going into Crown Heights and asking for Menachem Mendel, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to go into Shushan and ask for Mordechai. There's so many Mordechais. So it says the Gemara, Amar le, hayoshev b'shar hamelech. I don't know, the Mordechai who sits by the king's gate. Amar le, sagele b'chad diskarta, inamin b'chad nara. The truth is, king, you don't have to do all of this. Why don't you just give him one city or one river? In other words, what Haman was saying was give him a city from which he could collect taxes, or give him a river that has a bridge from which he could collect tolls. And that's rewarded financially. You don't have to do this whole display of allowing him to wear the king's clothing and riding on the king's horse. Not necessary. King says, you know what? Amrale, hanami havle. That's a great idea. In addition to everything else, also give him a city and give him a toll bridge. Al tapa mikol asher dibarta. Do not leave off anything you said. Vayika Haman es alavush v'esasus. So must I get ready for this story. So therefore Haman, exceptionally humbled and chastened, right, goes in and takes the clothing, takes the horse. Azal ashkeche diasir abonon kamei umachvile hilchos kamitza. So this is incredible. So we'll say, so what happens? So Haman goes to find Mordechai. Finds Mordechai, and he finds Mordechai giving a shir. What is Mordechai giving a shir on? The halachos of kamitza. But remember again, what's kamitza? You offer up a cup of mincha. What do? Right? The mincha is flour together, oil mixed together. Kohen takes his 3 middle fingers, scoops up, shaves off the side. That's the piece, right? What you catch in the 3 middle fingers, that's what's put on the mizbeach. The rest of it is consumed by the kohanim. So they're learning Hilchos Kamitza. Kevan dechaze Mordechai da'apik lekable. Kevan dechaze Mordechai da'apik lekable v'susei miyachem biyadei mirsas. When Mordechai sees Haman approaching with clothing and a horse, he becomes afraid. He says, Haman's coming to kill me. Zilu mikamei delotachvu begachaloso. So Mordechai quickly disbands the shir, tells the Rabbanim, run away. Haman is here to kill me. Don't get caught up in this. Literally translated, it means don't get burned by his coal. Go save yourselves. Bahi shaita nisatef Mordechai v'kam letzuluse. So Mordechai decides, he wraps himself in the davens. Mordechai is right. He's saying vidui. Right? He's done. Asun Haman v'yasev lan kamayu v'orich ad desalik Mordechai letzuluse. So Mordechai apparently is like davening mincha, davening Shemona Esrei, and he's taking a long time. Haman sits there while he's finishing Shemona Esrei. Amar le b'mayos kisu. Tell him. So Haman says, incredible. Haman says to Mordechai, we know this. They knew each other. They knew each other, right? This is not two people, right? They know each other. Remember, we saw in yesterday's daf, Haman was Mordechai's slave, was his servant. Mordechai bought him for 10 loaves of bread. They knew each other. So Haman says, no, what are you learning? Right? What were you giving the shir on? So I'm like, Bisman Shabbos Midrash Kayim, Manda Menade Mincha, Maisima Leikum Tzei the Soul. So Miskarpale, we're learning about Kmitza and Kmitza. During times of the Beis HaMikdash, a person brought the carbon mincha, they would take a kamitza from the mincha, and they would affect the Talmud through the kamitza. Amrale, so let's listen to what Haman says. Asa malikum se kimcha didachu, v'dachi asara afe kikari kaspa didi. Ultimately, again, your little kamitza has overpowered my 10,000 silver shkalim. In other words, at this point in time, it appears that Haman realizes the tide has turned. Right? He realizes now that this is the beginning of his downfall. Your little kamitza has undone my 10,000 shkalim. I'll just mention very quickly. It's interesting that they're learning Hilchos Kamitza, right? Why are they learning Hilchos Kamitza? So we'll say there's something very profound about Kamitza. Number one, the Musar of Kamitza is HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need you to do a lot. He just needs us to do a little. As long as we do it with heart. As long as we do it with kavanah, right? The kamitza is just a tiny little bit of flour that you put on the mizbeach. As long as you give something to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And remember again what Mordechai is trying to inspire the Jews. We have to do something. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. It could just be a kamitza. It could just be something. It's so important. The Rebbe Shalom does not require heroic activity. He just requires activity. Just do something. Just advance myself in some way. Just work on one little thing, just the kamitza. You know what the other chap of kamitza is? Kamitza also teaches us that in life, you hold on to very little of what you grab onto. Right? Isn't it an incredible thing? Right? You go like Chazal tell us, a person is born into this world and their hands are open. Right? As if to say, I'm going to take everything. And then when we die, our hands are often clenched, often highlighting the fact that we hold on to very little of what we try to grab. We try to grab a lot of things in life. And the Klal Gadol is, we'll say a good metaphor for life. Like when you go to an arcade or something, they have that claw game. I don't know what the statistics are in the claw game, right? But I would venture to say someone's making a lot of money off those machines, right? Because it's such an incredible metaphor for life. Most of the stuff you try to hold on to, you don't really hold on to. So therefore, be very careful for what you grab for. See, Kamitza says you hold on to very little. So think a lot about what you're trying to grab onto. Think a lot about what you're spending your life trying to acquire. Because most of the things you grab, you will drop. But therefore, pay attention. What are the things you want in life? Go after those things. But ultimately, don't try to chop everything. This is true of materialism. It's true on so many different levels. But so that's the halachos of Kamitza. So ultimately, again, I will say often, when do people realize this lesson that you hold on to very little of what you try to grab onto? When they're near death. You see, in life we think we can hold on to everything. When you're staring death in the face, as the Jews of Shushan were, you begin to see life in such a dramatically. You see life through the lens of Kamitza. Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need everything, he just needs something. You hold on to very little of what you really grab onto in life, and therefore be attentive to what you try to grab. In any event, Haman is overwhelmed by the fact, he says, that here your little kamitza went ahead and offset my thousands of shkalim. Amrli Rasha, Evet shekan nechasim evet lemi, nechasim lemi. So listen to this. And Mordechai says, Rasha, what do you mean you're 10,000 shkalim? You're my servant, right? You're my servant. Who does the servant belong to? What does everything else belong to? Amrli kum lavosh hanimani uruchav haisusa. Fine. So Muhammad says, all right, enough of small talk. Right? Put the clothing on, get on the horse. Right? Put the clothing on, get on the horse. So the Gemara says, this is what the king wants you to do. So what happens? So Mordechai says, listen, I've been fasting. It's not right to put on the clothing. I have to go to the bathhouse. I have to take a bath. And I need a haircut. Right? I have to look correctly. So we'll say what happens. Shadra Esther vastarinu lakula b'nei bani lakula umni. So we'll say what happened. So ultimately, again, Esther quickly, puts out a decree. All the barbershops close, all the bathhouses close. So what happens? Save one. So the Gemara says, Ailinu ihu lebei bani va'asche va'azal va'aisi zuza mi beisei the kashakal be mazye. So I'll say, what happens? Why does she close up everything? Because essentially, again, she causes Haman to act as the bathhouse attendant and as the barber for Mordechai. So Haman goes back to his house, gets his scissors, as we're going to see. Haman was a barber also, right? So she humiliates Haman by forcing him to act as the bathhouse attendant and as the barber for Mordechai. So v'hadi de kashaka le ingid ve'isnach. As Haman is giving the haircut to Mordechai, he sighs. Amar le amai kamis nachas. So Mordechai says to Haman, why are you sighing? Amar le gavra da havachashav. First white line. Gavra da havachashav le lamalka mikulu d'ravnui hashta l'shavye balani v'sapar. The minister who was so important in the eyes of the king. Now I'm a bathhouse attendant. Now I'm a barber. Amar le rasha. V'lav sapar shal kvar kartzum hayisa. Tana Haman sapar shal kvar kartzum haya. Esrim v'shtayim shana. So I will say, listen to this. Mordechai says, Haman, you were a barber. For 22 years, you were the barber in Kfar Kartzum. Let's not go ahead and get so carried away with yourself. Which is also an incredible musar to sometimes be humble about our beginning, no matter what we accomplish in life, to always remember our humble beginnings and to always approach life with a sense of humility. So Haman is saying, being a barber is so beneath me. To which Mordechai says, what are you talking about? That's who you were for 22 years. So the Gemara says, so after Haman gave Mordechai a haircut, he gets him dressed. Amrle, sak v'rachav. All right, get on the horse and ride it. Amrle, lo yachilna tikachisha chilai mime tanisa. You know what? I'd love to get on the horse. I'm really weakened from all the days of fasting and I can't mount the horse. Gachin v'salik. So ultimately, again, literally Haman bends down so that Mordechai could use him as a step to get onto the horse. Ki salik, as he's getting on the horse, stepping on Achashverosh, ba'at bey. He kicks Haman. He kicks him. Amar lei. So Haman's a little taken back. He says, Ksiv lechu, bin fal ayvech al tismach. So this is pretty incredible, right? So Haman says, Mordechai, it's beneath you. Right? The pasuk says, you should not rejoice at the downfall of your enemies. Amar lei, Mordechai responds, Hani mili bi Yisrael. That's talking about a Jewish enemy. Aval bedidachu ksiv, v'ata bamosenu tidroch. By you, it says we're supposed to trample on the high places. You, Haman, are the kind of enemy that we kick when you're down and we celebrate when you fall. So now, both at this point in time, right, Mordechai took a bath, got a haircut, kicked Haman on the side, got on the horse, right, and he's being led through the streets. And Haman is calling out, this is what you do for the man who the king favors. So we'll say, watch this story. Ki hava nakit va'azl b'shvila de Haman. As Haman was leading Mordechai down the horse right by the street where Haman lived, chazise barte de kaima igra. So Haman's daughter is standing on the rooftop. Savra haidirachav v'haidemaski kamei Mordechai. She assumes the guy on the horse is her father, and the guy leading the horse is Mordechai. What did she do? Shakla atzitza de beis hakise v'shadrisa arese davua. She takes the bedpan from the house, the latrine from the house, and she dumps it out on the guy leading the horse. Dali ene. So then he lifted his eyes. V'chaza da'avuahu. And she saw it was her father. Nafla me'igra li'ara umesa. At that point, she threw herself off the roof. She took her own life. She was so humiliated about what she did to her father that she took her own life. Because that's why the pasuk Mordechai went back to the gate of the king. So he returned to his sackcloth and to his mourning. And Haman returned to his home in a state of mourning and with his head covered. Avel albito, he was mourning for his daughter. V'chafui rosh, and his head covered. Al she'iralo, his head covered with it. So also, I'll just point out over here, there is a certain tragic element in this story as well. How it's amazing how what gaiva does to people, what arrogance does to people, and how arrogance, by the way, doesn't just affect you, but arrogance affect your family also, right? And arrogance, the traumatic fallout of arrogance is that it ruins anything and everything around you as well. Haman told the story to Zeresh, his wife, and to all who loved him. It calls him his loved ones and the wise ones. What's going on? Whoever says something wise is called a chacham. Remember again, now everybody's tune changes. And they say to Haman, by the way, if Mordechai is a Jew, pretty much you're not going to be able to overcome him. If Mordechai is from the other Shvatim, potentially you could overcome him. However, V'im Yeshevet Yehuda, Binyamin, Ephraim, Umenashe, Lo Yachlislei. But if he's from one of those tribes, Yehuda, Binyamin, Ephraim, Menashe, those tribes are vested with an additional amount of strength, and you will not be able to overcome Mordechai. Yehuda dichsiv yadcha ba'aref avecha. Yehuda, because it says your hand will be on the nape on the neck of your enemies. Inoch dichsiv behu v'lefnei Ephraim u'Binyamin u'Menashe oras k'vurasecha. Because here the pasuk says, before Ephraim, Binyamin, Menashe, awaken your strength. Ki nafal tipa lefanav. Because Haman, you will surely fall before Mordechai. Why does it talk about nafal tipol? Why two fallings? So the Gemara says, Amrlo, umazu meshula la'afar meshula kochav. It's interesting on both sides. The Jews, Jewish nation, are compared to the dust and compared to the stars. Kishen Yardin, when we experience a downfall, Yardin ada afar. When we fall hard. We fall hard to the dust. Kishen olin olnakom. But when we ascend, right? When we ascend, we're able to ascend all the way to the stars. So I saw what happened. Now, Haman's in the middle of this whole discussion, and then the attendants of the queen, or of the king, I should say, of the king, come to bring him to the second party. Melamed Shiriuba Bahala. They brought him in a state of Bahala, right? We'll say Bahala, confusion, right? Haman has lost his daughter, had a bedpan dumped on his head, kicked by Mordechai, gave a haircut to Mordechai. Everything is just crazy. And he's hurried now to the party. So we'll say, now fast forward a little bit. Now here is where Esther says, Kinim karnu ani va'ami, kinatzar shove benezek hamelach. So ultimately, again, Esther says, I have been sold. Right? Me and my nation have been sold to destruction. And she says, if we were just sold as slaves, I wouldn't say anything. Kiatzar shove benezek hamelach. What does this mean? Amra lo, tsar zeh eino shove benezek hamelach. She says, this tsar, Haman, does not care about any harm that comes to the king. Ikni ba bivashti v'katla. I'll show you how. Look what Haman's done to you, king. He got upset. He became jealous of Vashti. He wanted Vashti's influence and power. So what does he do? He turns you against Vashti, and you killed her. Hashta ikni bididi umibayla miktali. Now Haman is turning against me, and he wants me killed as well. Vayomer lamali. Why does he see two vayomers? Amar biyavo b'tchila ayidei turgaman. Listen to this. This is incredible. This entire time, Achashverosh was talking to Esther through a turgaman, through an interpreter, through a third party. Right? Kevan da amrile mi bebe shal kasina miyad v'yomer le'Esther malka. This is just wild. Achashverosh never spoke directly to Esther. He spoke to her through an intermediary. Why? Since he did not know who she was, he felt perhaps it was unfitting for him to speak to a commoner directly. When she divulges her identity, that number one, she's Jewish, but she comes from royalty. Because remember again, Esther comes from who? From Shaul, who was a king. Once he heard that she was monarchy, then he began to speak to her directly. Vatomer Esther, ish tsar v'oyev Haman hara hazeh. Amr Belazar Melamed Shaisamachve Klape Ish Klape Achashverosh Uba Malach V'Sasra Yadeh Klap Haman. It was incredible. When she said Vatomer Esther Ish Tsar V'Oyev, she was going to point at Achashverosh. She was going to give Achashverosh Musa. You are such a manovel. You are such a Rasha. She had a little angelic intervention that just nudged the finger a little bit to the side and moved it towards Haman. Right? A good idea for Esther not to give Achashverosh too much musr. The king gets up in his anger. Right? The king is overwhelmed by this revelation. So the Gemara says, he went outside, and then he came back from the garden. Makishiva lekima. Makima bechemus, like when he got up. Ultimately, he was angry. Afsheva bechemus. So when he comes back from the garden, he's also angry. The azl, so I'll say what happened, because when he went out to the garden, what did he see? The azl v'ashkach l'malachi ashar t'idin le'kagavri v'ka'akri le'ilani debustag. Listen to this. He goes out to the garden, and he saw angels dressed up as workmen, disguised as workmen. And what were the angels doing? They were uprooting his garden. So he says to them, "Ba'amrle, my uvdaich, what are you doing? Amrle tipakdinan Haman. Haman told us to do this." So he comes out to the garden. Haman's uprooting the road. First of all, you see, by the way, the amount of angelic intervention that's happening here. And what a metaphor for life. You never have any idea how many malachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu is dispatching all around us to help shape circumstances, right? Malachim everywhere, which is pretty amazing for a sefer written without a navi, right? Without any nevuah, there are malachim doing anything and everything. Asa, what happened? Asa lebesei, Achashverosh comes back inside. V'Haman nofel al hamita. Haman fell on the bed. So nofel, what does it mean nofel? Nofel, it should say. Amar Rabbi Elazar melamed sheba malach ve'pilu aleha. A malach came and pushed Haman on the bed on top of Esther. Achashverosh comes in. Well, so you have to imagine this scene. Achashverosh comes in. Vaymi beise, vaymi bavra. What is happening in my garden? What is happening in my house? Right? In my garden, Haman is uprooting trees. In my house, I'm not sure exactly what Haman is trying to do. So again, Achashverosh says, are you trying to conquer the king with me in the home? Or are you trying to take advantage of the queen? And I'm right here. Chavona also says, by the way, king, those gallows is for Mordechai, who saved your life. Now, the Gemara says, by the way, don't think Charvona is a big tzaddik, right? Even though we say Gam Charvona Zachor Latov, Charvona was a Rasha. He was a Rasha. But Rasha also Itza. Kevan Shirash Shalon is Kaima Atzaso Miyad Barach. So Yabosai, Charvona was on Haman's side. Until when? Until he realized that Haman was going to lose. Yabosai, it's a sad thing, but people are often opportunistic. Right? Let's say it's a very important, it's a sobering yesod in life. Many people are opportunistic. And maybe even you could say most times people do what's best for them. That's why I both say, people like to talk about all their friends. In life, maybe you have one or two real friends. Maybe. Right? And maybe 3 or 4 if you're very popular. A lot of times it's just one, and sometimes for many people it's none. Because a lot of times it's hard, it's a hard lesson in life, but people often do things for what's best for them. If we have mutual alignment for what we need, fantastic. But the moment that alignment falls out, people are going to do what's best for them, and friendships, quote unquote friendships, often fall by the wayside. I know that sounds very jaded. I will say, but it's the MS in life, and it's kedai to know that people are often agenda driven. So Charvona is not a tzaddik. Right? Charvona just realized, wow, Haman's lost. So I better switch teams quickly, very quickly, because that's the only way I keep my life and I keep my position. So the Gemara goes weiter. So they hanged Haman, and as a result, the Gemara says, the king's anger subsided. Why 2 angers, right? Or why 2 subsidings? One for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one for Achashverosh. Or others say one was the anger of Esther, and one was the almost like revenge of Vashti. L'kulam not Shabbosai. Now we're switching gears a little bit. Shabbosai, that is the end of the Megillah. That is the end of the Megillah. What a Josh and Shabbosai. How much more we appreciate Megillah as Esther now that we know this entire sub-story, all of these different narratives. Incredible. Shabbosai, but we're not finished. We're finished with the Megillah. So listen to this. L'kula nasan leish chalifos smalosh u'lebinyamin nasan chamesh chalifos. Shabbosai, remember again. After Yosef reveals his identity to his brothers back in Parshas Vayigash, so the Torah says that Yosef gave to each of the brothers a change of clothing, and to Binyamin he gave 5 changes of clothing. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. Efshar darshan itztar ba'osa tzadik amid beis yikashel bo. So I will say, how can it be that the very thing that caused Yosef so much pain, that he was going to do the same thing in his family? What is this a reference to? The Amar Rav Bar Mechasya, Amar Chaim Bar Goya, Amar Rav. Bishul Mishkol Shnei Slem Milas Shosef Yosef Yaakov Yosef Mishar Echav, because Yaakov Avinu spent literally again $10 extra, by example, $10 extra on Yosef's coat, more than the other brother's coat. What happened? Niskal Gil Hadavar, the matter escalated. V'yardu Avosinu leMitzrayim, and we were led down to Egypt. Both say Chazal blame Egyptian exile on Yaakov Avinu. You played favorites. You spent $10 more on Yosef's coat than all of the other brothers. And what happened? It created such strife, such animosity, and it ultimately led down to the relocation of the family to Egypt, which ultimately led to the servitude, barbaric servitude in Egypt. And now Binyamin, Yosef, you're the one who suffered. You suffered. 22 years you're separated from your family. The time you were sold as a piece of chattel, you spent time in prison, you were degraded, you were dehumanized, and now you're doing the same thing? Right? You give all the brothers of Binyamin 5 changes of clothing? Says the Gemara, no. Amrabi Binyamin bar Yafes, Remez Ramazlo. No, this was a symbolic gift. Sha'asid ben Lotzeis mimenu, sheyetze milefnei hamelech v'chamish levushe malchus. That Yosef was foreshadowing that Binyamin was going to have a descendant who was going to go out before the king in 5 articles of clothing. Who's the descendant to whom we are referring? Mordechai Atzadik. Mordechai is a descendant of Binyamin. Ish Yemini. Right? Mordechai Yatza Bilvush Malchus Tcheles Osai. So the pasuk is Bilvush Malchus Tcheles Chor Aterazav Gedula Tachrich Ubutz Vagavan. So again, you have Mordechai coming out in all of these articles of clothing. So the 5 articles of clothing that Yosef gave to Binyamin symbolically represent the 5 articles of clothing that Mordechai was going to wear when he was paraded out before the people. So the Gemara says, the Maharsha says, that's great, but it doesn't answer the question. Right? It doesn't answer the question. In other words, Yosef is still showing favoritism. The Maharsha is very interesting that the value of the 5 changes of clothing that Mordechai gave to Binyamin was of equal value to the 1 set of clothing that Yosef gave to all of the other brothers. So that the brothers realized that Binyamin wasn't getting more, that they realized that there was a symbolism attached to this gift that they did not necessarily understand. The value was the same for all of the brothers, just Binyamin was given a more symbolic gift in 5 articles of clothing. Incredible. So we'll say, now once we're talking about Yosef and Binyamin, the Gemara says, Vayipol al Tzavari Binyamin Achis. Remember again, the pasuk says, Yosef fell on the necks of Binyamin, and Binyamin fell on the neck of Yosef. Kama Tzavar Hayu Binyamin. How many necks did Binyamin have? Right, that it says Yosef cried on his necks. Ultimately, again, I will say Yosef cried for the 2 Batei Mikdash, the first Beis HaMikdash, the second Beis HaMikdash, that are in the tribal area of Binyamin that would both be destroyed. Vasidin licharev. Ubinyamin bacha al savarav, and Binyamin cried on the neck of Yosef. What did he cry for? Bacha ab Mishkan Shiloh, sha'asid lios bechelko, sha'yosef ba'asid licharev. Binyamin cried ultimately again for the Mishkan that would be in the tribal area of Shiloh, which was the area of Menashe and Ephraim. Incredible, I will say. There's so much to say about that also. You remind me, Bernard, can't get to it this morning. Shabbos say, the pasuk says, Yosef says to his brothers, you see, your eyes see, and the eyes of Binyamin see. Amar Belazar, Amar Lahem, Keshem she'ein belibi al Binyamin achi, shalahim michirasi. Yosef says to his brothers, same way, I bear no animosity towards Binyamin, because he was not involved in my sale. Kachin belibi aleichem. So too I bear no animosity towards you, my brothers, as well. Ki pi hamedaber aleichem. For it is my mouth that is speaking to you. Say, listen to this. Ki pi kain libi. Shabbos said, this is incredible. Yosef says, I promise you, what I'm saying, ki pi kain libi. What I'm saying is the way I feel. I will say sometimes the most difficult life in relationships is when people are echad bepeh ve'echad belev. They say one thing, but they feel something different. Yosef says to his brothers, Kipi, Kilibi, I promise you, or the words that are coming out of my mouth reflect the sentiments that I possess in my heart. Ola aviv shalach kizos asara chamorim, no simitov nitzrayim, and to his father, to Yaakov Avinu, he sent 10 donkeys laden with the best things of Egypt. So my mitov nitzrayim, Rabbi Binyamin Yafes, Amar Belazar, shalach lo yayin yashan. He sent an aged wine. Shedas zekinim nochehemenu, because old people like aged wine. Young people like aged wine also, but the Maisa, again, this was apparently, again, it has a special impact, a special importance for older people. So the brothers come before Yosef and they prostrate themselves before him. This is what people mean when they say, when the fox has his moment, bow down to him. Shabbos says, interestingly enough, again, the fox is not the king of the jungle. He's not the most important of the animals. But even the fox, when he has his moment of greatness, respect him. So the Gemara says, Tala, I don't understand, how is Yosef the fox, right? Yosef is the viceroy in Egypt. He has all the power. The brothers have none of the power. So my bitziru me'ach, but why is he any less than his brothers? Ella i'it marhakid. That's what you have to say. Vayishtachu Yisrael rosh hamita. That remember when Yaakov and Yosef are reunited, and Yosef comes to visit Yaakov, Yaakov bows down to Yosef. Amra b'Yomi bar Yefes, Amra b'Elazar, Tala be'idna sagile. That's what it means when the fox has his moment bowed down to him. In that case, again, Yosef, when compared to his father, Yaakov was the gadol, Yosef was not. But yet Yaakov exhibits honor towards Yosef. When the fox has his moment, show him respect. Vayinachim osam, vayidaber alibam. Yosef consoled his brothers, he spoke to their heart. Yom Yafes Amra b'Elazar, Melamed she'amar lahem dvarim shemiskablen al alev. Yosef said to his brothers things, good words that penetrated the heart. What did he say to them? Uma asara neiros lo yochlu lechabos ner echad. If 10 candles, reference to the brothers, could not extinguish one candle, reference to Yosef, so the Gemara says, Heich yachol echad, heich yachol lechabos asara neiros. Then how could one candle go ahead and extinguish 10 of them? So we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up, we'll say, don't worry, tomorrow Miras Hashem, the daf and begin to get shorter. We'll catch up, we'll say, what a day. What a day. What a Gemara. Shkayach, everyone.